Hi, I've been meaning to do a video about my needle phobia for a little while. It's kind of taken me a bit of psyching myself up to do because although I've had some phobia therapy to deal with it all, it obviously still makes me anxious to speak about it. I'll come to all this in the video, but I just wanted to do a little disclaimer for anybody who might be watching who has been frightened of needles or especially phobic of needles, because I understand completely. There was things where I wanted to get help and I did as much as I could by myself, but if there was a tiny concept that somebody might be showing an image of a needle or anything like that, then I wouldn't go anywhere near a YouTube video or anything that claimed to help people with a needle phobia, because everybody's experience is different, but I just wouldn't have been able to bring myself to watch something like that. So there will be no images of needles in this video. It'll literally be me discussing how I became phobic, my experiences of being phobic, and then how I got help to cope with it all. When I was little, they thought that I might have glandular fever, so when I was about 4 or 5 I had to have different blood tests, and I wasn't bothered, I wasn't frightened at all. The nurse said I was excellent and gave me notepads and all the rest of it. Didn't flinch. And then when I was 7 I had to have 4 teeth extracted, and I went and they said, oh, you're going to have a gas mask, you'll be put to sleep, and then when you wake up those teeth will be gone. So my mum and dad had like a little discussion, probably mum and mum, saying, do you understand what's going to happen? This is the anaesthetic they're going to give you. It doesn't sound like they're going to give you like a needle in your arm, but just this is what would happen this way, this is what happens this way. So I was fully equipped with the facts of how teeth were extracted and things like that, because my mum and dad tried to kind of make it where there was no mystery around things, because I feel like you can cope better with things if there's no element of surprise. So went in that day and then they weighed me, and I thought, I'm sure when we had our little talk that my mum said that you would be weighed if you were going to have an injection. Okay, well, no, because the dentist said I would be having a gas mask, so why would adults lie? Why would they change their mind? And then they were obviously weighing me to know how much anaesthetic to give me, and then, long story short, I was in the dentist chair, and before I knew it they were sticking a syringe in the bend of my arm. Now, because I got a shock, my mum even got a shock. I'd braced my arm at the last minute, so like all this area of my arm became bruised. So when I woke up my arm was very tender, it was like a purpley bruise, and that was the beginning of it really. For the next 23 years, up until the age of 30, I became progressively worse, avoiding needles as much as I could, whether that be on the telly. It stopped us from going to certain places on holiday because I refused to have the inoculations. Yeah, films, if somebody watched something and said there was something in, I just said no, I'm not watching that, because I just couldn't bear the thought of it. With regards to school immunisations, I, under duress, had them. It usually took for a nurse to sort of, not restrain me, but support me while the other one did it. The biggest thing for me was, especially with health professionals, nobody seemed to realise that it was a proper phobia. Everybody's frightened of needles. It's just a little scratch. These are all the stupid cliche things that I heard for 23 years. And it makes you feel like you're just acting up over nothing, but at the end of the day, a phobia is an irrational response. It is not a fear. It is, I would rather be dead than have this happen to me. And the time that I kind of hit rock bottom with it all was I was talking to my mum in the car. Now, my mum and my husband are two of the only people who probably understood exactly how bad I was. Everybody else just thought, oh, she's scared of needles. But my mum said, oh, but you'd be able to do it to save your life or save somebody's life, like including my mum, my dad, my brother, whoever. And I said, no, I don't think I could. And I burst into tears because that's such a terrible thing to say, that you couldn't do this one tiny thing, but this is how serious it was to me. And then there was sort of like a period where I thought, I need to get help for this, but I don't know where I can. And like, my GP wasn't very sympathetic, the GP I was with at the time, and then slowly over time there was more and more people. Like, I worked in a doctor's surgery for a bit, and they said, oh, you might have to have a HEP injection because you're handling samples. And I just flipped out and I started crying. And that's like the least professional thing in the world. I mean, I nearly turned down the job on the off chance that I would have to even like have a discussion about needles. And then the nurse, who was the practice nurse, she was lovely. She was so sympathetic, and she said, I can see that you are like a very severe phobic. If you ever want to talk to me about it, or if you ever had to have anything done, would you consider letting me do it? And I said, no, it's not about that. It's not about the person. It's like literally about the act. And now her son, I didn't realise until then, he was exactly the same. He would faint. I would always just sort of freak out and like cry, become hysterical. So it was nice to kind of have an ally. But she was one of the first people who really understood, and then I think the ladies who I worked with like really kind of got to understand just how bad it all was. Shortly after that, I got made redundant from there. I was covering long-term sick, so it wasn't a redundancy as such, but I did have to lose my job there. And the doctor kindly went and had a word with a pharmacy in the same building, and asked if there was any openings there, and that he would vouch for me and all the rest of it. And I nearly didn't take a job there because of the same fear, because they did actually mention to me, you probably have to handle syringes, like empty syringes with no needles in. But I mean, even at that time, that was too much. But what I did is I went and I spoke to them, and I made it quite clear to all the staff when I started, who were all very friendly, that this was the case, and I would do everything I could to try and challenge myself. But if it became too much, would they kind of help me out? So that was never a problem, and I think that kind of helped me sort of start coping with things a little bit better, because I was having to challenge myself every day. I was having to have these discussions about injections, candid things about discussions about insulin and all the rest of it. So that in itself was a therapy, but then there was only so far I could go by myself. So I knew I had to kind of seek a professional help for this phobia. So why did I do something about it? Well, it was taking over my life. Like I say, I wouldn't watch certain things on television. There was discussions that I couldn't take part in, like with friends and family, because I found it too distressing. It was completely ruining my life. And the pharmacy that I worked in, they had a discussion about whether to get a needle exchange or not, and I had to just go and lock myself in the toilet for 10 minutes, and it sounds really embarrassing and dramatic, but I was in floods of tears, and my friend had to kind of coax me out of the toilet, and the discussion just kind of got put on the back burner until I wasn't there. So you can't live your life like that. And also because I was 30, I knew that if I wanted to have children, that needles would be involved, because you have to have blood tests, or you are recommended to have blood tests. Then there's all the labour. It's very hard to avoid anything, and you shouldn't really be avoiding this stuff, especially when it's in the best interest of your child. So I'd had a particularly bad day and I was upset, and I decided to do something to try and turn everything around. While I was at work, I'd seen a leaflet for a place called Talking Matters, and it was like a mental health place in Middlesbrough, which is like a town over from us. Now, I always think mental health sounds very daunting, so I ended up bringing up a place in Middlesbrough, which is a town over from us, called Talking Matters. Now, I think these kind of things are all over the country in different names, but it's a free service where you can self-refer, or you can get your doctor to refer you. I self-referred in a moment of desperation, and they offer lots of like counselling. They do CBT, which is what I ended up having, which is cognitive behavioural therapy. I'll go on to explain what it is more though. Lots of different like mental health things. Now, mental health I think always sounds like you're loopy or something, and I think people are more embarrassed about approaching places like this because it's like, you have a mental health problem. Well, do you know, I think it's about time in this world that people didn't have to feel embarrassed for having a struggle, whether it's depression or because you've got phobia or just anything like that. If you want to try and get better from it, get on with your life, then like just even cope, then what is wrong with that? So what happened is I rung up, and I imagine they could probably hear the desperation in my voice. I was like, I need to know if you can help me. I have a severe needle phobia. Is this something that you can help with? And the lady was lovely, so approachable, so kind, so warm, just the exact kind of voice that you need to hear when you're really like at the end of your tether. And she got me to answer a few questions, and then said that like an assessment, like a telephone appointment, would be set up. And she told me what time, what day, so I wasn't sort of just expecting a call all day, especially when you know that you have to talk about something that you are the most frightened of in the world, or like smashes your head in, and like it's bad enough anyway without sort of going to have a surprise discussion about it. So she was very punctual and friendly the next time I spoke to her, and she took more details, sort of assessed just how frightened I was, I suppose what a risk I was to myself, all these kind of things to prioritise your care. They ask if it, I think they asked if it was okay to like notify the GP that I was sort of seeking help for it, which I mean didn't have a problem with. I kind of just wished that he'd done it. And then not long after that I heard back to say that I had my first appointment, was it okay, that date and everything. And so October of 2013 I kind of took a step in the right direction. So at my first appointment, I had a chap called Phil who was my CBT guy, and basically my experience of CBT is the first couple of appointments he got me to kind of put him in the picture of exactly what had happened. So kind of how I've explained to you in this video, how I came to be like that, what my experiences had been. I had to fill out like a little chart of like 1 to 10 on all these different questions of how I felt. Like, I think they were just trying to gauge if I was like depressed at all, or I suppose if I had a risk of like killing myself about it all, because they must speak to so many people who are desperate in whatever way. And it's a good way for them to gauge how well the sessions are going for you, like week on week or fortnight on fortnight, to see if this therapy is helping. So we had 2 very emotional, draining sessions, but it was kind of cathartic in a way to get it all off my chest. And he made odd notes and asked odd questions, and a lot of it was just about me speaking. So although it kind of rinsed you out a little bit, I kind of, because I was so ready for this help, I was just determined that things were going to get better. Then the sessions that followed, I can't remember exactly in what order, but the gist of it was that I had to decide on a hierarchy of steps that I could take, like baby steps, to start to defeat this phobia. And the best part about it is, because you set the steps, you're just moving at your own pace. You can move quicker, you can move slower. Nobody's like pushing you to like kind of feel worse about everything. There was like a couple of times where I said, oh, I would like to sort of challenge myself a bit more, or there were times that I kind of had to stick on one level for a little while, because I suppose, especially with needle phobia, that there's very few ways that you can challenge yourself specifically, to say like have an injection or something. As it was, by the December I was pregnant, so I knew that there were going to be opportunities for me to have blood tests and things, and it was just how I was going to handle that. In hindsight, it might have been a bit of a stressful kind of time in early pregnancy, thinking, well, if my therapy's not going to be helping me as much as I need it to in time, then this is going to be pretty scary, because I have to cope with it anyway. But I've always been somebody where I like to kind of push myself, and so this was no different. So after ever so many sessions, it got to February, so I was probably about 8 weeks pregnant, and you kind of have blood tests at the time. Now, I'm still funny about the bend of my arm. Is the thing that I'm completely phobic about. I'm better about it now, because before I couldn't look at somebody touching the bend of their arm, I couldn't touch the bend of my own arm. So like, as you can see, I can do it fine, doesn't bother me. Like, I couldn't even really link arms with people because of the contact and what it reminded me of. So when I had to go for these blood tests, I asked for it to be taken out of a vein in my hand, and everyone said, oh well, that like might hurt a little bit more, but I said, no, this is how I'm going to do it, so this is the compromise. I either have it like that or I don't have it at all. And that's very irresponsible, but this is how I'm going to be able to do it. So my mum came with me to the phlebotomists. The first one, obviously, because I was so frightened, they were trying for ages and they actually had to stop because I was so like stressed about it all. They couldn't get a single drop out of me, so they sent me along to another place, which was actually in the building where I worked. So I was kind of like trying to dodge it, because otherwise people would be like, well, what's she getting blood for? And Natalie doesn't get blood tests. And it was early days, I didn't want anybody to know I was pregnant. So I managed to avoid people sussing me out without a disguise or anything. But they couldn't get it either. So on this hierarchy, one of the things that I chose to do was to start carrying an oral medicine syringe around in my bag. Obviously there's no needle, it just comes with like children's medicine. It got me used to handling it, it got me used to sort of seeing something like that all the time, because a long time ago, I mean, it's like slightly funny now, but at the time I was ready to smash my first floor bedroom window and jump out. She had those printer ink syringes to like draw any excess ink out so there was less waste. And she'd come in the room to show me them, thinking that it would like desensitise me, when all I did was run across my bedroom, back up against the window and like scream and cry and almost hyperventilate. So it was a really good step that I'd decided myself to carry around, and very quickly I noticed a difference in my attitude towards it. Now as this hierarchy went on, I had to get used to touching the end of my arm, and then later I had to get used to like touching it with like a pen or something that was like not my hands. And then later on again, I had to test myself by using this oral syringe, and then getting my husband to use it. So I was getting used to not having control and getting used to the sensation and things like that. Phobia Phil, as I called him, he asked me to kind of discuss what I thought was going to happen if I had an injection. Like, so if this happens, then what next? What next? What next? Until you kind of think, yeah, I don't know what I think is going to happen. And with phobias and fears, quite a lot of the time, so for argument's sake, mine was about the phlebotomy room. So it was like, oh, so tell me the story of how you would have blood taken. So I went through it, about the waiting area, about the anxiety, going in the room, sitting down, wondering if people were going to be sympathetic, how everything was going to go. And then he said, so what happens after, for argument's sake, say you had the blood taken, what would happen after that? And I was like, well, I don't know. And he went, you'd get up and you'd go home, you wouldn't be dead, like nothing would happen to you. And it's kind of thinking of the full process. It all sounds far too easy, but when you're having CBT and it's over so many months, like I think I had CBT for about 9 months. Like I had never had blood taken since I was little. I'd had minimal injections, and I actually willingly went the second time I needed to have pregnancy bloods, and just went and didn't even cry. It was like the ladies who'd seen me in the February instead of like the June, couldn't believe it. They said, you're not even recognisable, you've come by yourself, you're not like hysterical. Like they couldn't believe the change. And I'd gone into this CBT process not believing that it could change. I'd wanted to do something about it, obviously, because I was there, but it wasn't a case of going in with a really positive mind or anything. It is literally, it does work, but you do have to keep testing yourself. It's not a miracle cure, it's simply resetting your frame of mind. But I would recommend it to anybody, because if I can sort of come around from that and cope, like anybody can, really, anybody can. And then in labour, I had to have I had to have a blood test, I had to have a steroid injection because my baby came early, for those of you who haven't seen any of my videos. He was 6.5 weeks early, so they were trying to like boost his lungs. I had to have an injection in my thigh to make me give birth to the placenta. I had to have a local anaesthetic for some stitches. I had to have the stitches. So it was just, I wouldn't have been able to do it if I hadn't had the CBT. It is absolutely incredible. And this service, Talking Matters, it didn't cost me a penny. And that was another thing that was a big problem, was that I wouldn't have been able to afford to go to like a private phobia therapist, but I'm really glad I didn't, because I really got on well with Phil. I trusted him. He was just incredible. I'm going to put a link in the comments box so you can see that the work that they do. If you are local to me, you'll be able to use that service. And please do use it, because these things rely on people using them, otherwise people think that they're not needed anymore. And there's so many people who are in the same position as me, in like whatever guise, where it would be of use to you. You can change your life for the better. It took me 23 years and I just wish I hadn't sort of waited that long, because it's helped me have the most precious thing in my life, which is my son, Toby. So thankfully I haven't managed to get too emotional, but I really hope that this spurs you on to do something to help yourself, that you won't waste as many years as I did just being terrified, that it won't stop you from visiting people in hospital, it won't stop you from having a baby, it won't stop you from going on holiday, it won't stop you from watching a film, it won't stop you doing any of these things that you should just be able to do. I'm going to carry on testing myself forever and ever and ever, because I don't ever want to be as like down about everything, and isolated by this phobia ever again. Thank you so much for watching. Like I say, I hope this helped you. Please message me in the comments box. I'll put my blog address below, so if you would like to privately email me about it, please don't feel that you have to bare your soul in the comments box, but just do take steps to do something. Thank you for your time. Bye.